It wasn't the explosions or the G-forces or even the alien squawks over the comms that got to me. It was the silence, the heavy, suffocating silence that settled in my gut every time I saw the numbers. Simulation 782, 99.97% probability of mission failure. My name is Jarek, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a pilot, a Zith pilot. We're different. We're not born, not in the traditional sense. We're cultivated, engineered, designed in the forges to be the perfect weapon in the war, the unending war against the Klaxon. We're precise, calculated, emotionless, or at least, that's what they tell us. The truth is, I feel things, doubts mostly. We're bred to fight the Klaxon, long-range engagements, strategic strikes, calculated maneuvers, but is that all there is? Are we just living calculators in fighter cockpits? Our training facility is functional. Sterile white hallways, blinking consoles, the constant hum of energy fields, and the ever-present feeling of being watched. Every action, every thought even, feels cataloged, analyzed, and optimized. Efficiency above all. The simulations are our proving ground. Complex scenarios where we face off against virtual Klaxon swarms, testing our skill, our reaction time, and our adherence to doctrine. I excelled, always did. Top of my class, lauded for my strategic thinking, my ability to predict enemy movements, to optimize firing solutions. But even in victory, a nagging feeling persisted. Something was missing. That's when the announcement came, crackling over the intercom, slicing through the sterile monotony of the training facility. All cadets report to the briefing room, new recruit arriving. Designation, human code, Elias. A human. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room, antennae twitching, multifaceted eyes widening. Humans were legendary in a way. Known for their adaptability, their ingenuity, their sheer, unadulterated chaos. They were also volatile, unpredictable, and driven by emotions that we, the Zith, struggled to comprehend. Human, in our squadron, the voice belonged to Trenix, another top cadet, known for his unwavering adherence to protocol. His tone was a mixture of disbelief and barely concealed disdain. I didn't say anything, just watched the others. There was a collective unease, a sense of intrusion. We were a finely tuned instrument, and a human was a wrench thrown into the gears. The briefing room was already crowded when I arrived. Cadets jostled for position, their whispers a low, anxious hum. Commander Vorin, his segmented body rigid with authority, stood at the head of the room. "Silence," he commanded, his voice amplified by the vocoder built into his throat. "As you know, the war with the Klaxon is at a critical juncture. We need every advantage we can get, and that includes embracing unconventional methods. This is Elias. He is human, and he will be joining your squadron." The door slid open, and he walked in. And Elias, he wasn't what I expected. I imagined some hulking brute, a wild-eyed warrior brimming with aggression. But he was ordinary. Average height, lean build, short-cropped hair, and a surprisingly calm expression. He scanned the room, his gaze meeting mine for a brief moment, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Greetings," he said, his voice warm, almost friendly. "Name's Elias, looking forward to flying with you all." His words were met with silence. The Zith cadets stared, unsure how to react. We were trained to analyze, to strategize, not to socialize. Commander Vorin cleared his throat. "Elias, you will familiarize yourself with our protocols and simulation exercises. Cadet Jarek will assist you." All eyes turned to me. I felt a ripple of annoyance. I was preparing for the advanced combat simulation, not babysitting a human. "Dismissed," Vorin barked, and the cadets quickly dispersed, leaving me alone with Elias. He turned to me, his smile widening. "Jarek, right? Thanks for showing me the ropes. I've read the reports. The simulations you guys run here are intense." "They are designed for optimal combat readiness," I replied, my voice clipped and efficient. "Yeah, I get that, but tell me something," he said, tilting his head, a curious glint in his eyes. Do they ever feel real to you? I mean, do you ever wonder what happens when the calculations go out the window, when the enemy does something unexpected? The question caught me off guard. It was a thought I'd often suppressed, a doubt I'd kept buried deep within my consciousness. The simulations account for all possible variables, I said, my voice firm, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Elias just smiled, a knowing, almost sad smile. Sure they do, until they don't. He paused, then clapped me on the shoulder. All right, lead the way, Professor. Show me what these simulations are all about. As I turned and headed towards the simulation room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. The arrival of the human wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a glitch in the system, a question mark hanging over everything I thought I knew. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't entirely sure I had the answer. The simulation room was exactly what you'd expect, a large, circular chamber dominated by a holographic projector. The walls were lined with neural interfaces, sleek and cold against my segmented limbs. I led Elias to one of the interfaces, a knot of apprehension tightening in my gut. This was my domain, my territory, and I wasn't sure I was ready to share it. All right, Professor, what's first on the curriculum? Elias asked, his voice surprisingly light, breaking the tension. He ran a hand over the interface, his brow furrowed in concentration. Looks complicated. It's designed for precise neural integration. The simulation will respond directly to your thoughts, your actions, and of course to our established combat protocols, I explained, my tone still clipped. I called up the basic engagement scenario, a standard patrol route with a klaxon intercept. Textbook stuff, something any Zith cadet could ace in their sleep, and something I knew intimately. Standard patrol route, huh? Bit predictable, isn't it? Elias commented, glancing at the schematic. Predictability minimizes risk, I stated flatly. It maximizes efficiency. Maybe, Elias said, a sly grin spreading across his face. But it also makes you an easy target. What if they know what's coming? I suppressed a sigh. Here it was, the human penchant for questioning everything. The klaxon operate on instinct, on brute force. They're not strategists. We dictate the terms of engagement. All right, I'll play along, Elias chuckled, settling into the neural interface. But just for fun, after this little stroll down predictable lane, can we try something different? I didn't reply, focusing on initiating the simulation. The holographic environment shimmered into existence, a vast expanse of stars, dotted with asteroids and swirling nebulae. The patrol route appeared as a thin blue line projected onto the void. Follow the route. Engage the klaxon intercept with Standard Energy Weapon Protocol 7, I instructed, my voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Elias's fighter, a sleek, agile craft, materialized beside mine. He acknowledged with a quick comm signal, then accelerated along the designated path. For a while, everything proceeded as expected. Elias followed the route, his movements smooth and precise. He seemed capable, even impressive despite his earlier remarks. Then the klaxon appeared, a swarm of bioengineered monstrosities, their chitinous bodies glinting menacingly in the simulated starlight. They moved with a ferocity that belied their lack of intelligence, their weapons firing in wild, unpredictable bursts. Engage, I commanded, activating my energy weapons. I targeted the lead klaxon fighters, calculating their trajectories, optimizing my firing solutions. It was a dance I'd performed countless times, a symphony of numbers and energy. But Elias did something completely unexpected. Instead of engaging the enemy head-on, he veered sharply off course, diving into a nearby asteroid field. It was reckless, foolish, a blatant violation of protocol. Elias, what are you doing? Maintain formation. I barked over the comms, my antennae twitching with irritation. Just a little detour, Professor, he replied, his voice laced with amusement. Gotta keep 'em guessing. He weaved through the asteroid field with an audacity that bordered on suicidal, his fighter dancing between the jagged rocks with impossible grace. The klaxon swarm, caught off guard, hesitated, their clumsy forms struggling to navigate the treacherous terrain. This is insane. You're exposing yourself to unnecessary risk, I protested, my frustration mounting. Risk is relative, Jarek, Elias retorted, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. They expect us to fight them head-on, they don't expect us to disappear. And then he did. Using the asteroids as cover, Elias vanished from the klaxon's sensors, his fighter a ghost amidst the swirling rocks. The klaxon, confused and disoriented, began to scatter, their formation breaking apart. Now this is where the fun begins, Elias chuckled, emerging from the asteroid field behind the disorganized swarm. He unleashed a barrage of rapid-fire energy pulses, targeting the klaxon fighters from point-blank range. His shots were precise, almost instinctive, each one finding its mark with deadly accuracy. The klaxon fighters, caught completely off guard, were annihilated in a matter of seconds, their bioengineered bodies exploding in bursts of simulated energy. It was brilliant, utterly reckless, completely unorthodox, but undeniably brilliant. He hadn't followed the plan, he hadn't adhered to the protocols, but he had achieved a result that I, with all my calculations and strategic brilliance, could never have accomplished. I watched in stunned silence as Elias finished off the remaining klaxon fighters, his movements fluid and unpredictable, a stark contrast to the rigid precision of my own engagement. Simulation complete, the computer announced, its voice echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. Result, victory. I stared at the holographic display, my mind racing, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Elias had broken every rule, defied every protocol, and yet he had won. And he had done it with a level of skill and intuition that I, a supposedly superior Zith pilot, could only dream of. Well, Professor, what do you think? Elias asked, turning to me with that infuriatingly knowing smile. Did I pass the test? I didn't reply immediately, struggling to reconcile what I had just seen with everything I had been taught, with everything I believed. The simulations accounted for all possible variables, I had said. But Elias was a variable they hadn't accounted for, a force of nature that defied calculation. Your methods are unconventional, I said finally, my voice measured, carefully avoiding any hint of praise or admiration. Unconventional but effective, Elias countered, raising an eyebrow. Sometimes you gotta ditch the textbook and trust your gut. That is illogical, I stated, my antennae twitching again. Logic dictates that adherence to established protocols minimizes risk and maximizes efficiency. Logic is great, Jarek, but it's not everything, Elias said, his voice softening. Sometimes you need to feel it to know it, not just calculate it. You're good, really good, but you're thinking too much. You're letting the numbers dictate your actions, instead of letting your instincts guide you. His words struck a chord, echoing the doubts I had long suppressed. Was he right? Was I too reliant on logic, too afraid to trust my own intuition? Before I could answer, the intercom crackled to life again. Cadet Jarek, Cadet Elias, report to Commander Kalen for debriefing. Immediately. I glanced at Elias. His expression was unreadable. As we turned and headed towards the commander's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the humans' arrival had set something in motion, something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about combat, about ourselves, and about the war itself. Whatever the debriefing held, I knew one thing: life in the squadron would never be predictable again. Commander Kalen's office was, unsurprisingly, just as sterile and functional as the rest of the facility. It was a small, rectangular room, dominated by a large holographic display that constantly cycled through tactical schematics and sensor readings. Kaelin herself was a study in controlled intensity, a veteran pilot whose reputation for discipline and strategic acumen was legendary, even among the Zith. She was waiting for us, her 4 eyes fixed on the doorway as we entered. "Cadet Jarek, Cadet Elias, please be seated." Her voice was cool, efficient, betraying no hint of emotion. We sat in the 2 chairs facing her desk, the silence stretching, thick with unspoken tension. I could feel Elias shifting beside me, a subtle sign of his own unease. I, on the other hand, kept my posture perfectly erect, my mind blank, waiting for her assessment. "Cadet Jarek, your performance in the simulation was adequate, as always," Kaelin began, her gaze never wavering. "Your adherence to protocol remains exemplary." However, she paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Your engagement with the unorthodox maneuvers of Cadet Elias requires further evaluation." I nodded, my antennae twitching almost imperceptibly. "Understood, Commander. I maintain that Cadet Elias's tactics were a deviation from established doctrine and presented unnecessary risk." "Unnecessary, perhaps, but effective," Kaelin countered, her gaze shifting to Elias. "Cadet Elias, your simulation result was unexpected, to say the least. Your methods were a clear violation of protocol, displaying a disregard for established combat doctrine. Explain yourself." Elias leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, almost nonchalant. "With all due respect, Commander, the Klaxon aren't exactly known for playing by the rules. Our protocols are efficient, sure, but they're also predictable. Predictability gets you killed." Kaelin's eyes narrowed further, her segmented body stiffening. "Are you suggesting that our training methods are ineffective?" "Not ineffective, Commander, just incomplete. They prepare you for what should happen, but not for what will happen," Elias replied, his voice respectful but unwavering. "Out there, things get messy. You need to adapt, to improvise, to think on your feet. You can't calculate your way through every problem." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the holographic display. I could feel Kaelin's displeasure radiating from her, a palpable force that threatened to overwhelm the small office. "This is not some human playground, Cadet Elias," she stated, her voice laced with barely concealed anger. "This is a war. We are fighting for our survival, and we cannot afford to indulge in reckless improvisation. Our training is designed to maximize our chances of success, to minimize casualties. Your intuition is a liability, not an asset." Elias remained unfazed, his gaze meeting Kaelin's with unwavering intensity. "And what happens when your protocols fail, Commander? What happens when the calculations don't add up? Do you just give up, or do you find another way?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. I found myself shifting uncomfortably in my seat, the doubts that Elias had stirred within me now churning with renewed force. Was Kaelin right? Was Elias a reckless liability, a threat to our carefully constructed world of logic and efficiency? Or was he offering something more, a glimpse of a different way of fighting, of surviving? Kaelin turned her gaze to me, her expression unreadable. "Cadet Jarek, your assessment." I hesitated, my mind racing. This was it, the moment of decision. I could dismiss Elias's methods as illogical, reaffirm my faith in the Zith doctrine, and maintain the established order. Or I could acknowledge the truth, the unsettling reality that Elias had exposed. Cadet Elias's methods were a clear violation of established protocol, I began, my voice carefully measured. "However," I paused, taking a deep breath, "his success cannot be ignored. He achieved a victory that, under standard protocols, was improbable. He demonstrated an ability to adapt, to improvise that is lacking in our training." Kaelin's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She hadn't expected that. I had broken ranks, deviated from the established narrative, and acknowledged the validity of something unconventional. Are you questioning our training methods, Cadet Jarek? Kaelin asked, her voice dangerously low. I am questioning the limits of those methods, Commander, I replied, my voice firm, my antennae held high. We are bred for precision, for calculation, but we are not adaptable. We rely on protocols, on data, on logic, but we lack the intuition, the creativity that Elias demonstrated. Perhaps that is a weakness we need to address. A long silence followed, the weight of my words settling heavily in the room. Kaelin stared at me, her expression unreadable, her mind clearly racing, grappling with the implications of what I had just said. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer, almost thoughtful. Very well, cadets, your assessments are noted. I will be forwarding this simulation data to the research facility for further analysis. In the meantime, you will both continue with your training. Elias, you will adhere to established protocols. Jarek, you will monitor Elias's progress and provide a full report on his integration into the squadron. She paused, her gaze sweeping between us, a hint of something akin to curiosity in her eyes. Dismissed. As we left her office, Elias clapped me on the shoulder, a wide grin spreading across his face. Well, Professor, looks like you're stuck with me. Don't worry, I promise to try and be a little less unconventional. I didn't return his smile, but a flicker of something resembling amusement tugged at the corner of my mouth. Do not expect me to abandon logic, Elias, I said, my voice still measured, but lacking the clipped formality of before. I will, however, concede that there may be value in exploring other possibilities. As we walked back to the simulation room, I knew that things had changed, irrevocably. Kaelin's decision to forward the simulation data to the research facility was a significant development, a sign that even the highest echelons of the Zith military were beginning to question the established order. And I, a lifelong adherent to protocol, had just taken my first step towards something different, something that could potentially change the course of the war itself. The simulation room seemed different now, less sterile, less imposing, almost welcoming. I looked at Elias, his eyes sparkling with anticipation and a sense of excitement. A feeling I hadn't experienced ever surged through me. All right, human, I said, a hint of a smile finally gracing my lips. Let's see what else you've got. As Elias smiled, a knowing, almost sad smile, and began preparations to log into the simulation system. The days that followed were a blur of simulations, debates, and, well, a surprising amount of laughter. The research facility, that sterile, ever-watchful entity, had taken a keen interest in Elias, subjecting him to a battery of tests and analyses that would have driven most beings insane. He, however, seemed to thrive on it, answering their questions with a blend of patience, wit, and occasional exasperation. It's like they're trying to dissect my brain, Jarek, he'd complain with a weary sigh after a particularly grueling session. Do they not have any actual scientists to talk to? But even amidst the tests, we continued to fly, continued to simulate combat, and continued to challenge each other's perspectives. I, tasked with monitoring Elias's progress, found myself becoming less of an observer and more of a participant, experimenting with the unorthodox methods he had championed, blending them with my own precision and strategic thinking. It wasn't easy. My initial attempts were disastrous. I found myself hesitating, second-guessing my instincts, overthinking every maneuver. I was too used to relying on data, on calculations, to simply feel my way through a combat scenario. You're still trying to control it, Jarek, Elias would say, watching me struggle. You gotta let go, trust your gut. It's like dancing. You can't think about every step, you just gotta move. Dancing, the concept seemed absurd, almost offensive to a Zith pilot. But I knew he was right. I was too rigid, too controlled, too afraid to embrace the chaos. Then came a breakthrough, a moment of clarity amidst the simulated explosions and energy pulses. We were running a particularly complex scenario, a multi-pronged klaxon assault on a vital supply convoy. The Zith protocols dictated a defensive formation, a tight perimeter designed to protect the vulnerable transports. But the Klaxon were overwhelming, their numbers pressing against our defenses, their attacks becoming increasingly relentless. I found myself falling back on instinct, on a feeling, a sense of where the enemy would strike next, not based on data, not based on calculations, but on something else. I broke formation, abandoning the defensive perimeter, and dove into the heart of the Klaxon swarm, my fighter weaving between the enemy ships with a reckless abandon that would have made Kalen shudder. It was a gamble, a high-risk maneuver that exposed me to immense danger. But it worked. The Klaxon, caught off guard by my unexpected aggression, hesitated, their formation faltering. I unleashed a barrage of energy pulses, targeting the enemy's command ships, disrupting their coordination, and sowing chaos amongst their ranks. It was a dance, a chaotic, violent dance, and I was leading not with logic, not with data, but with my instincts, with my feelings. The remaining Zith pilots, witnessing my sudden and unexpected attack, quickly adapted, following my lead, abandoning the rigid defensive formation and unleashing a coordinated counterassault that shattered the Klaxon swarm. "Simulation complete," the computer announced, its voice filled with a hint of admiration. "Result, victory, unorthodox tactics utilized, analysis pending." I pulled back, my heart pounding, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. It had been exhilarating, terrifying, and transformative. "Not bad, Professor," Elias said over the comms, his voice laced with genuine praise. "Looks like you're finally starting to get the hang of this trust-your-gut thing." I didn't reply, too overwhelmed by the moment to speak. I had done it. I had broken free from the confines of my training, embraced the chaos, and achieved something truly remarkable. The news of our success spread quickly through the training facility. The research facility, initially skeptical of Elias's methods, began to take notice, expressing a newfound interest in the potential of human intuition and adaptability. But the real test was yet to come. The Klaxon were growing bolder, their attacks becoming more frequent, more aggressive. The war was escalating, and the Zith military was preparing for a major offensive, a push to finally break the Klaxon's advance and secure the sector. Our squadron, now a hybrid of Zith precision and human ingenuity, was selected for a critical mission: to defend a remote colony world, a vital supply hub that was on the verge of falling to the enemy. It was a trial by fire, a chance to prove that our unorthodox methods, our newfound blend of logic and intuition, could stand against the brutal reality of war. The colony world, a small, unassuming planet on the edge of Zith space, was hardly a strategic stronghold, but it was a vital link in the supply chain, a lifeline for the war effort. Losing it would be a major blow, crippling our ability to sustain the fight against the Klaxon. As we approached the planet, the signs of war were already evident: shattered orbital stations, burning wreckage drifting in space, and a sky choked with smoke and debris. The Klaxon had arrived, and they were not playing games. "This is it, boys and girls." Kalen's voice crackled over the comms, her tone serious, devoid of the usual controlled calm. "Hold the line. We cannot let this world fall." I glanced at Elias, his face grim, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before us. There was no trace of his usual lightheartedness, only a quiet intensity, a steely resolve. "Time to dance, Professor," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Let's show them what we've learned." And with that, we dove into the chaos. It was no simulation, but a battle. What happened next was chaos, absolute, terrifying chaos. The Klaxon descended upon the colony world like a swarm of locusts, their bioengineered bodies tearing through the planet's defenses, their energy weapons scorching the surface. The sky was a swirling vortex of explosions and debris, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning metal and alien biology. We dove into the fray, our fighters weaving through the chaos, engaging the enemy in a desperate attempt to hold the line. The Zith pilots, initially overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the Klaxon assault, quickly adapted, falling back on their training, their precision, their calculated movements. But this time there was something more, a newfound aggression, a willingness to take risks, to push themselves beyond their limits. Elias, of course, was in his element. He moved through the chaos like a dancer, his fighter twisting and turning, dodging enemy fire with impossible grace. He was everywhere, a blur of motion and energy, inspiring the other pilots with his audacity, his unwavering resolve. "Remember what we talked about, Jarek? Trust your gut. Feel the flow of the battle," he yelled over the comms, his voice barely audible above the din of combat. I tried to follow his lead, to let go of the rigid protocols that had defined my career, to embrace the chaos. But it was difficult, almost impossible. I found myself hesitating, second-guessing every maneuver, my mind struggling to reconcile the logic of the simulations with the brutal reality of war. Then it happened. A Klaxon heavy cruiser, a massive bioengineered monstrosity bristling with energy weapons, targeted Kaelin's fighter, unleashing a barrage of focused fire that overwhelmed her shields, crippling her craft. "I'm hit, I'm going down," Kaelin's voice screamed over the comms, her tone laced with pain and panic. Without thinking, without calculating, without even considering the consequences, I broke formation and dove towards Kaelin's crippled fighter, intending to draw the enemy's fire, to buy her time to escape. It was a reckless, suicidal move, a blatant violation of every protocol I had ever learned. But in that moment, all that mattered was protecting my commander, protecting my squadron, protecting the world below. I engaged the Klaxon cruiser, unleashing a barrage of energy pulses, drawing its attention away from Kaelin's fighter. The cruiser, a lumbering behemoth, turned its weapons on me, unleashing a torrent of energy that threatened to overwhelm my shields. I weaved, I dodged, I danced, my fighter responding to my every thought, my every instinct. It was a blur of motion and energy, a desperate attempt to survive against overwhelming odds. Then a searing pain ripped through my neural interface, my mind flooded with static and white noise. The cruiser's energy weapons had found their mark, crippling my fighter, severing my connection to the simulation. I was going down. As my fighter spiraled out of control, the holographic environment dissolving around me, I saw Elias streaking towards the cruiser, his fighter a blur of motion, his weapons blazing. He was coming to rescue me. Then nothing. I awoke in the research facility, my body aching, my mind disoriented. The sterile white walls seemed to close in around me, the blinking consoles a mocking reminder of my failure. "Jarek, are you all right?" I turned to see Elias standing beside me, his face etched with concern. He was whole, unharmed, a stark contrast to the searing pain that still throbbed in my mind. What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my thoughts still struggling to coalesce. "You went down, man," Elias said, his voice low, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and regret. "You saved Kaelin, bought her enough time to escape, but you took a hell of a beating." "Kaelin, is she all right?" I asked, my voice laced with anxiety. "She's fine, just a few scratches," Elias replied, a hint of a smile gracing his lips. "She's grateful, we all are." "But the colony?" I asked, my gaze sweeping around the room, searching for answers. Did we hold the line?" Elias hesitated, his expression clouding over. "We fought hard, Jarek. We used everything we had, every trick in the book, but it wasn't enough. The Klaxon, they were too many. The colony fell." A wave of despair washed over me, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. We had failed. Despite our best efforts, despite our newfound blend of logic and intuition, we had lost. And now, the colony world, a vital link in our war effort, was in the hands of the enemy. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Elias placed a hand on my shoulder, his gaze meeting mine with unwavering intensity. Now we learn, we adapt, we come back stronger. He paused, then smiled, a spark of that old, familiar defiance flickering in his eyes. The Klaxon may have won this battle, Professor, but they haven't won the war, and as long as we're still breathing, they never will. We stepped out into the hallway together. The air was palpably charged. A huddle of cadets I knew from the training block stood clustered around the corridor wall. As soon as they saw us, they parted. They looked at me and then at Elias. It was a strange mix, their expressions, awe, fear, respect. "Jarek, you," one of them started but faltered. He simply nodded, his respect apparent. "They're saying," Elias began quietly, "that you took down 3 capital ships before you went down, that you broke their line." "Protocol, Jarek, was that in the plan?" Another chided me, but there was no malice in it. I simply shook my head, unable to find the words. But in that moment, I understood something profound. The true strength wasn't in precision or calculation or even in intuition. It was in something more, something deeper, something that transcended all our training and all our protocols. It was in the willingness to sacrifice everything, to risk everything, for something greater than ourselves. And that was something that the Zith, with all their engineering and all their strategic brilliance, had never been able to cultivate. As we rounded the corner, we saw Commander Kalen waiting for us. I had a feeling she had been listening to the conversations. Kalen's body shifted toward us. The face that was projected toward me was no longer just a mask of command, but something else, something approaching, gratitude. "Cadet Jarek," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Your actions were unexpected, and contrary to established protocol, I should be severely reprimanding you for this reckless display." And yet, I ventured, trying to make eye contact and failing as always. She gave a barely perceptible nod. "And yet they are not only justified but laudable. You saved my life. You secured the escape of several transport vessels. You showed a level of courage I didn't think you were capable of. And I'm in charge here, so I guess I am the one who needs more training." I stood stunned, not sure how to respond. What could one say to that? "To that end," Kalen continued, her voice regaining some of its usual cadence, "I am assigning you both a new task. As of now, you are tasked with implementing changes in the training program. You, Elias, will be in charge of developing new combat simulations designed to emphasize adaptability and improvisation. You, Jarek, will be in charge of integrating these new techniques into our established protocols, balancing the need for structure with the need for creativity." "Commander," I started, "are you sure this is wise?" Kalen fixed her gaze upon me. "No, but it is necessary. This war demands that we evolve, that we adapt. And you too have shown me that there is more than one path to victory. I will take responsibility and put my own career at risk. But maybe, just maybe, we can change things." We stood for a moment as the enormity of this task began to dawn on me. A Zith, bred for precision and calculation, tasked with teaching improvisation. It was absurd, almost comical. But I knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. "You can count on us, Commander," Elias said, stepping forward, his voice filled with that quiet intensity that always seemed to surprise me. "Then get to it," Kalen replied, a hint of a smile finally gracing her lips. "And try not to blow anything up." As we turned and headed back towards the simulation room, the weight of the task ahead settling heavily on my shoulders, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. We had lost a battle, yes, but we had also won something far more important. The chance to change, to evolve, to become something more than just living calculators in fighter cockpits. The simulation room seemed different now, transformed by our experiences, by our struggles, and by our newfound understanding. I looked at Elias, his eyes sparkling with anticipation, and I knew that together we could do this. We could redefine combat. We could forge a new path for the Zith, and perhaps for the entire galaxy. So human, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Where do we begin? As I reached for the simulation interface, my tone lacked the clipped formality it had before. Elias smiled back with a mix of challenge and triumph. As a new chapter in Zith history began. The sun dipped and made our shadows grow long down the halls. It is a new day.